Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to my 3 takeaways episode from the Cloke interview that I did this past Monday. Unbelievable interview. I've been doing a lot of different interviews lately with communication experts and how to get through to other people, and I think that Ken had some such really unique things that he brought up that weren't necessarily brought up in other interviews. Other interviews had their unique things as well, but I really loved his perspective as a mediator for over 40 years. I mean, he's had so many different conflicts that he's had to resolve through relationships at work and different things like that. So many of these communication tips and tools can be used in conflicts at work, in conflicts in relationships, conflicts anywhere. So make sure that you go back and listen to the episode so you can get some of these tips. I'll touch on them here in the 3 takeaways, but there's nothing like hearing him articulate them through his experience. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast. If you haven't yet already, make sure you share this with a friend who you know is trying to work on their communication, or you know who is trying to get to the next level in their job, or who's maybe trying to fix their relationship or anything like that. Because in this episode, we talked about how to, even if the couple's thinking about divorce, how you can get out of that thought process and with the steps that you need to do as a couple to avoid that. As we talked about advice for couples in general who are new and what they can start to do to avoid any kind of talk about divorce and just so many great things like that. I want you guys to get that value from this, and I want your friends and family to get that value as well. But with that being said, let's get right into my 3 takeaways. Takeaway number 1 is framing the problem as an it, not as a you. He talks about this. It's so important because so many times we think when there's a problem in our life, we think it's the other person. The problem is the other person. And while there might be some truth to that, the other person might not be cooperating in some particular way, it does no good for you to verbalize it as their problem to them. Because if you say the problem is them, then they're going to get defensive, and they'll probably say the problem is you. They'll call you a name, say what your deficiencies are and stuff like that. And it just spirals out of control, and the conflict just gets worse and worse and worse. But if you talk of the problem as an it, then it's something that you and the other person or you and the other people can resolve together. You can start asking the question, what can I do to help resolve this problem that we have? You can ask that to the other person. Like if you have a problem or if there's a conflict between you and some other person, imagine the power of asking that other person, what can I do to help resolve this problem? What can I do to help you out to help solve this problem? Because if you're showing them that you're taking some ownership yourself, then they're more likely to take ownership as well. And then you can resolve the conflict together as a team. Takeaway number 2 is search for the bread. I absolutely love how he described this. So he talked about there's a couple of different ways that you can resolve a conflict with opposing perspective and opposing points of view. He said the first way is basically through compromise. And that's like if hot water meets cold water, then you get lukewarm water. That's compromise. But say you've got flour, water, and heat, and those 3 together get bread. But before the bread, you could never imagine what that bread would look like because all 3 of those things have nothing to do with bread. But the creativity that they combine together allows for a creative solution. But you have to be willing to discuss. You have to be willing to be curious about the other person's point of view to be able to get that curious answer and be able to come up with something that had never yet before been an option. So I think one of the best ways to be able to do this is to be a committed listener to the other person. And what I mean by committed listening, and I got this phrase from a prior podcast, but it means this. It means believing that at any moment, what that person is about to say could change the course of my life. Like, if you have that true thought process, that the other person could say something that could change your life, you are much more likely to actually listen to them and then come up with a creative solution together. Takeaway number 3 is ask about their truth. This was super powerful because anytime you're in a conflict with somebody else, you have a truth and they have a truth. And none of them is particularly wrong. It's just that both of you guys have had different experiences leading up to that conflict. So he talked about what Ken said is a great question to ask that other person is what experiences in your life have led you to be so passionate about this topic? And what that does is it allows them to then go into their life, go into their experiences, tell you why they're feeling a certain way. It gives them the ability, the freedom to be able to go in and tell you why they feel a certain way. And then once you know why they feel a certain way, then you can be empathetic. You can make them feel felt, which is what Dr. Goulston, a prior podcast guest, talks so much about. He's like, to get through to somebody else, you have to make them feel felt. You have to know where they're coming from. And that's a great question in order to get that out of that person. So again, guys, my 3 takeaways. Number 1 is framing the problem as an it. Because if you frame it as a you, then you're not going to be able to find a solution together. So frame it as an it, then you can resolve the conflict as a team. Takeaway number 2 is search for the bread. Because remember, we don't necessarily always want to compromise hot water, cold water to make lukewarm water. But if you can come up with a creative solution together by being curious and leave the discussion open, then you can find a new creative solution. Takeaway number 3 was ask about their truth. When you know where they're coming from, when you know their experiences that led them to be passionate about a particular topic, you can then be empathetic. You can then find out what their truth truly is, and you can make them feel felt. I hope you guys enjoyed these 3 takeaways. I hope you feel like they're actionable, because that's the purpose of these 3 takeaways. It's for me to pick out a few things that I felt were really important and that we could start taking action on almost immediately in our lives to get us closer to the best version of yourself. So if you enjoyed it, let me know. Let me know your favorite takeaway. Send me a DM on Instagram. Other than that, I hope something here allowed you to find a little bit of clarity on what the best version of yourself looks like. And I hope something in here gave you a tool, tip, or maybe inspired you to get closer and closer to your best you.